What's up everyone, Lion Roar here, and we have a brand new assassin lizard clan in Bloodline Heroes of Lithis. It is the SEGARAK clan. So of course I'm going to do a full breakdown and talk about which one's better, the male or the female. But first, download Bloodline Heroes of Lithis, a mobile RPG action fighting game where you can marry your champions to create new and unique hybrids. Use the link in the description to start with some free stuff, including golden diamonds. See you hopefully soon. Alright, so let's start out by taking a look at the clan trait, and this one is called Demoralize. Do note that this is on an epic hero, so the numbers would be higher on a higher rarity champion. It says, for the first 10 seconds after the battle starts, reduces all enemies' attack speed by some percent. With an epic hero, it's 12%, higher for legendary and mythic. This effect does not stack. And this one's interesting because it was not that long ago that we got the Stone Thrower clan that increases your whole team's attack speed. And now here's a trait that's decreasing your opponent's attack speed. So now, I can't imagine that this scenario will occur below the highest levels of competition, but for those high tier players who are able to just throw a bunch of intimacy on companions that they get and need to be top of the meta, now you have a situation where you're going to maybe need to put the Stone Thrower clan trait on your at least one champion of your main comp and the Demoralize clan trait on, and the effect will be zero, right? Because if every team at the top of the meta who's facing each other has both of these, it's like they have none of them. But you can't afford to go without them, because if you go without them, then your opponent has an advantage. Kind of an interesting thing. However, at the tier 2 levels of play and below, I just think the resources get spread too thin for us to see much of that. But just saying, between the Stone Thrower clan trait and this one, they have a similar kind of effect. I mean, to me, to simplify it even more, either one is fine. If you didn't get Stone Throwers, get this one. This one, in other words, is saying increase your own team's attack speed. And the Stone Thrower clan trait is, in other words, saying slow your opponent down. Now, functionally, that's not exactly what happens, but to make it as simple as possible, the question is which team is faster, right? And this is helping that strategy out. So the clan trait is very, very, very good. If you missed out on Stone Throwers, this is an awesome one to level up, or vice versa. If you can't afford to go with this one, but you have the Stone Throwers, that's fine. If you're at the highest tiers of competition, you're probably going after both anyway. All right, now let's take a look at the male's abilities. And the first one is called Into the Foray. Swiftly charges behind the nearest enemy target, dealing damage to them and all enemies along the path equal to 480% of the caster's strength. So that leads me to believe this is a little bit of an AoE, not fully AoE, but AoE kind of ability. It's not even the ultimate, which is kind of interesting. Targets will receive additional damage equal to 50% of their lost constitution, capped at 1200% of the caster's strength. Also restores constitution equal to the amount of aforementioned additional damage. So obviously brutal is going to be an important trait for this one, because not only does it increase the damage, but also the healing. All right, now the ultimate. It's rare we see so few words in Bloodline Ultimate, but few words can be very powerful. Let's see what this one says. SEGARAK Slash. Swings tail swiftly, dealing 550% damage to the caster's strength, and pulls targets. Interesting wording, but we've seen this before. Sometimes champions push opponents away. Sometimes they pull them in. It can create kind of cool synergies as long as you take note of the other champions. Like if you want to bunch the champions up and deal a lot of damage, that's just take note of that part of this, because I think that can be an underrated part. Afterwards, deals damage to all enemies within range equal to 250% of the caster's strength, stunning them for 2 seconds. So now we have some CC mixed in here as well. Stun is obviously very, very powerful. It's one of the best crowd control effects in the game. And this could potentially be a lot of damage, because if you can group the opponents together, and there's other champions that will do that as well, kind of pull them in. So if you have opposing champions like Samir that are flying around the battlefield anyway, you might have a couple of champions to be able to kind of lasso them in and keep them in, and then just fire on them. So that's potentially a very damaging type of ultimate. Rend is a passive. The skill also inflicts a layer of bleeding when dealing damage, which causes the target to lose constitution equal to 150% of the caster's strength once per 3 seconds. This effect stacks up to 3 layers, increases caster strength by 12% for each layer of bleeding effect all enemies have. So now, if you have Brutal on him and you have this effect going off, he's just dealing more and more damage as he goes along. My first impression of this guy is he has the potential to be just a really big damage dealer, like a traditional type of assassin, like exactly the kind of champion that Male Bloom was. And I say was because if you haven't checked my video, they just nerfed him. It's an interesting nerf because they actually changed the text on him to make it look like a buff, but they fixed a bug that was making him really, really, really powerful. Make sure to go check out my video on that. I explain the whole thing in there. But anyway, one of the things that I said in that video was I'm not sure Male Bloom is good enough to hang in the meta anymore. I'm a bit worried about his ability to do what he was best at, which was dealing a large amount of damage to difficult to reach opponents. However, SEGARAK's looking like he might fill that role. Now, before everybody gets mad, because I want to take a second to explain this before we take a look at the female. Before everyone gets mad about a champion getting nerfed and then having to invest in a new champion like this, if you're really good about saving up your stones and everything, it shouldn't be too hard to get this champion. Cheap to play absolutely can get this with no problem. Free to play may have a little bit of an issue, but still, if you budget your stones, you can get it. It's not hard as long as you can get the mythic male to just move all the resources you put into Male Bloom over to this one. I just want to remind you of that because I think a lot of people think they've invested a lot of time and energy, and how could you possibly feed away an old hero? But just hit that reset button, get all the golden skill books back and move them over. It's fine. Not only that, if you put a lot of vigor on the Male Bloom, just transfer the vigor to a female character and then, you know, move the vigor from the female character over to him. It's not bad. It's really not bad to just replace one champion with another one. So if it turns out, and I'm just hypothesizing here, but if it turns out that Male SEGARAK is the new Male Bloom, and he does not do exactly what Male Bloom does, so I want to make that clear. It's just a lot of people are talking about, is he the replacement to Bloom? I think he can fill that role, but he does act differently. Don't expect him to do what Male Bloom does. He's not creating clones, and that's a type of like card advantage, which means that, you know, you have more champions on the board than they do, and that makes you more likely to win. Now, with Male Bloom not doing so much damage anymore, it's just extra HP for them to take down, which is not so much of a problem. He may be the real damage dealer we see now in that role. Do I think it's mandatory? Probably not. I'm speculating here, but I think that Male SEGARAK could turn out to be an A type of hero in tier lists. But we have to see some testing with that. Some early testing I saw with some top whale players shows that he's dealing a heck of a lot of damage. A lot of damage, like way outpacing Male Bloom and even a lot of the Bloodstorm legend, Bloodcraft legends, I should say. As long as he's built right and you create good synergies. So he has a lot of potential. I'm not willing to call him S tier quite yet, but I do think he's very, very strong and worth testing. Now let's take a look at the female. The first ability is called Dagger Drive, and this is what I expect from Bloodline, a whole lot of text. It says, randomly targets an enemy champion at the back row and throws a dagger at them, which ricochets to 2 more nearby enemy targets upon hit, each time dealing 300% of damage of the caster's strength. Now this actually looks more like the Male Bloom type of special than the male, so why did I say that the male may be the Male Bloom replacement? Well, we're gonna get to that, but this one, don't be fooled by the text on this one. It looks more like Male Bloom, but I don't think that she does what Male Bloom does. Continuing on. Afterwards, after the dagger drops on the ground behind the last target for 4 seconds, the caster then teleports to the dagger and picks it up to attack nearby enemies, dealing 200% damage of the caster's strength. Also increases the caster's attack speed by 30% and reduces damage taken by 30% for 4 seconds. When the dagger is in the air, the caster can attack and cast ultimate attacks as usual. When all starting back row enemies are killed, randomly targets another enemy. Whew, that's a lot of text to just say that there's a bunch of bouncing around with that dagger that's like dealing damage and all that kind of stuff. All right. SEGARAK's Blade Flurry. This one's a little easier to read. Becomes a storm of blades for 2 seconds and quickly slashes at the target and the nearest enemy, dealing 750% damage of the caster's strength. The attack won't trigger energy recovery for the enemies. That's a high amount of damage. So again, we're seeing big numbers here. Is the role she's trying to fill the one of the true assassin, where like she's dealing a lot of damage to specific champions, especially that back row? Let's take a look at the passive Reptilian Instinct. Normal attacks steal an additional 70 energy from the target. If the caster take more damage than 10% of the max constitution in the last 3 seconds, triggers a shed tail effect. The caster leaves a part of their tail behind as a decoy to attract enemy attacks, which lasts for 3.5 seconds, dispelling all debuffs, and teleports behind the current target with invincibility. That's another keyword, for 2 seconds. Immune to both control effect and damage. The shed tail effect can be triggered once per 8 seconds. All right, let me tell you what. There is a lot of text here I like to see. I like to see that she's going into the back row to hit usually hard to hit types of enemies. However, people have figured out a lot of ways to counter that. Just don't put your fragile enemies in the back. Maybe put them in the middle or something like that. One trick that I've done is actually put my more fragile champions up front, and then my more like tankier ones that engage in more melee in the back, and then they just run up to the front. And anyway, I'm getting a little bit more into strategy here, but basically what happens is your tanks run up and take the front position anyway, but they're considered back, and then like male blooms and other champions like this, female SEGARAK, when they hit the back, they're actually going for the front, the more tanky champions, which they're not trying to do anyway, and you totally destroy their strategy. So there's a way to counteract this, is all I'm saying. If you need more information about that, feel free to leave comments and ask questions. I also like here the amount of damage that's being done, and I like that we're getting some control effects here. However, in practice, she does not seem to be doing enough. Now, if I were completely speculating, I would have said she might be the more exciting one based on the text that I'm seeing. But in the videos I'm seeing, and it is still early, so maybe at higher vigor levels, it'll be different. But some whales have already gone for the 15-star champion puzzle rewards and have tested her out, and she is just not holding up. So Bloodline, more than any other game I've ever played, you actually need to see these in action, because sometimes the text, of which often there's a lot of text, looks nice, and then the effect's not actually all that nice, and then vice versa. Sometimes the text looks relatively simple and the effect is powerful. So, you know, I have to say that personally, between the male and the female, I'm thinking that the male is much, much, much more powerful than the female, and he's probably the one to go after right now. Now, you do what you want. If you like the text on the female better and you are experimenting and playing around with it and think that she's better, by all means, go for it. Usually in this first video where I'm covering the champions, we're just speculating. And I'll do some testing later on. But for now, if, you know, I'll just tell you what my plan is. My plan is to go after the male and level him up, because I think he's the one with the most potential, and to potentially even replace Male Bloom. I think the meta is shifting a lot anyway, where Male Bloom, even if he were still at full power, is not necessarily just absolutely a first main comp champion. Anyway, I had actually, just out of necessity, moved him off, because my main comp was just much more powerful without him than with him. It was interesting. Anyway, that's just because of the type of teams that I built. But he could potentially fill a role on your main comp if you don't have a lot of the other top tier meta champions, or maybe even on a second team. I can't see where to fit in female at this time. That's just what I'm doing. Now, what about traits? I think there's a lot of traits you can go with. There's a lot of flexibility here, but I think the one mandatory one is brutal, and that's for both of them, because not only is the damage being done by strength, but also the healing with him. And then otherwise, like, another one I like to put on champions like this is honorable, not energetic. And I'm liking energetic less and honorable more as time goes on because of all the healing and shield effects and things like that in the game, which interacts better with honorable than it does with energetic. First of all, putting energetic on these champions will make them appear more powerful. Your teams will have higher power. You'll get matched up against tougher opponents and be put into tougher VOC and guild conquest areas. I'm giving all my secrets away now. So I like honorable. I like brutal. If we're talking about clan traits, he's already got the one automatically on him that was given to him that's reducing your opponent's attack speed. I also like the stone thrower clan trait on him. If you've already got that clan trait on another one of your champions in your comp, I still like agile and focused. Now there's a point where you can put too much speed on your champions. So, maybe it's easier for you to go with focused or ambitious or agile, and you have to pick between them, and that's fine. You can put too many speed effects on your champions and ignore other parts that are important. But for all intents and purposes, I think anything you can do to make your team faster would be better. So those are traits that I tend to favor in this particular situation. But let me know what traits you're thinking of. Obviously, there's a lot of other clan traits that are going to interact with them well. The Tidestorm clan trait, although it is not as powerful as it used to be, is potentially another good one on him because of what he does. All right. So those are my thoughts. I know it was kind of a longer video, but I thought there was a lot to talk about here. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification, and I will catch you in the next one.